We've got about another minute for people to come in and get settled, but just wanted to let you know that I appreciate you being here. I appreciate the work that you do and that you're taking time out of your workday to come hang out with me and Julia and learn some really great stuff about storytelling on social media. All of that said, I want to just go over a couple little housekeeping things before we really dig into today's presentation. I see some familiar names here, and I was going to let you know if you are a QGIF client and you have any questions about how to apply any of what Julie is going to talk about today to your own fundraising and how you can do that with QGIF, let me know. If I can't get you the answer that you need, I will at least get you to someone who can. And I was also going to tell you, if you're not a QGIF user, everything you're going to learn today is applicable to you as well. So do let us know if you have any questions, and I will do my best to get you an answer. Just a couple really brief housekeeping notes. You are going to get a copy of this recording and you're going to get some extra resources. So keep an eye on your inbox. Those emails usually go out on Friday mornings, unless YouTube does something unprecedented, in which case you might get that on Friday afternoon. If you do ask questions, make sure you drop that in the Q&A box. There is a chat and a Q&A box. If you drop it in the chat, I will try my level best to find it. And make sure we get it asked. But if it's in the Q&A box, it's much easier to track, so I can get your question read. I did drop a note here also that we do live tweet the highlights of many of our webinars. And if you are a Twitter user, do follow along over on the QGIF webinar hashtag. And then if you don't already follow Julia, I highly recommend that you do so. I have followed her on Twitter for 8 years and she consistently posts awesome stuff. Yeah, you're one of the very first people I ever followed when I started working at QGIF. So.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
I'm so
you
flattered.
guys will learn something if you follow her. So that all said, I'm going to turn things over to Julia, who is going to blow your mind with some of the stuff that she has to share today.
Sure. Well, thank you. I'm so excited to be here. All right, I'm going to share my screen now. I want to show everyone my shirt. This is a shirt sent from QGIF. This is my fundraising shirt. I love it. I wear it all the time, and people are like on planes and other places are sort of like, what does that mean? And I know. So it's interesting though. It always starts a conversation. So I'm thrilled to be here with you today to talk about storytelling, talk about social media. Like Abby mentioned, throw your questions in the Q&A. We will get to them at the end. And I see some familiar names in here as well. So I'm just thrilled to get started. If you don't know anything about me, I am a mom of 2, and both kids are back in school. And then of course we'll be out again. I live north of Boston. Our last day is June 16th of school. I'm an author, speaker, a trainer. I'm a returned Peace Corps volunteer. I served in Senegal. And probably the most important thing about to know about me is that I come from the sector. I've been a development director, a marketing director at very small organizations. I was at one point development, marketing, and volunteer coordinator. So those 3 full-time jobs all in one. So if all of you are, or a lot of you are in sort of resource trapped, very small organizations, I feel your pain and I've been there. So I've done it all. I pretty much done everything in nonprofits except found a nonprofit on my own, but I've seen it from all angles. So thrilled to be here with you today. If you want to get the workbook, if none of these work for you, then feel free to email me. You can just go to my website, jcsocialmarketing.com/workbook, or even text the word workbook to 33777. If that doesn't work, then just email me. So we start off with West Side Story. So this movie, set in 1961, it was adapted from the 1957 hit musical of the same name, which was, of course, inspired by Romeo and Juliet. And my daughter, she loves musicals, and it's hard to find a movie that's not too babyish and not too mature. And she and I like to do Friday night movies when my husband puts my son to bed, and she and I do Friday night movies. So this is one of my favorite movies, and to see it through brand new eyes really was a treat. So the point here is that I talk a lot about the power of storytelling. I train clients on it. I wrote a book on it, but I don't usually get to witness its pure, true power in action. So Isabel, like most kids, she's 11. She can't sit through an entire movie. She fidgets, superhero tales, all that flashy CGI. It bores her. But the simple, timeless tale of the Puerto Rican Sharks versus the New York City Jets, two star-crossed lovers, a society designed to keep them apart, it absolutely captivated her. The universal themes of love and hate and fear and loyalty and revenge. And what it showed me is that it's not so much about the flash and the tools, and we get so focused on those kinds of things. It's really about these universal themes and the power of story. So great storytelling, it does more than communicate a message. It gets at the heart of how humans process information. So stories can help us visualize how we can improve our own lives and the world around us. And we know that popular stories and narratives define cultures, define our values, and define what we deem important. So it's not even enough that storytelling grabs attention. It's actually the way we process information. It helps us hear, and then it also helps us listen, and it helps us understand. And that's very important when we're talking about communicating a message, especially as nonprofits. We have so many things we need to do. We have to get seen, we have to get heard. We also have to pique curiosity, and then we have to get people to understand, and then we have to get people to take an action. I mean, those are a lot of different steps. But, since the dawn of time, storytelling has been used as a way for humans to comfort each other, to debate issues, to form social alliances, to make sense of the world around them. I love the teachings of Antonio Damasio. He says, we're not thinking machines, we're feeling machines that think. And this is what I really want to impart on you today. The other thing I want to say is that younger generations, they like stories. They live on stories. There's been a lot of reports done that people prefer brands that tell stories. And people from the ages of 18 to 34, I know it's probably a goal for all of you to engage more young people in your work, millennials and Gen Z. They're not interested in sales pitches. They are responsive to brands that they identify with on a personal level, that they can relate to. And stories, the effective story is tied to emotion. We like it when a story makes us feel something. It can be inspired, it could be angry, it could be sad, it could be heartwarming. When you deliver these high quality stories, we're much more inclined to listen and absorb the information. That is absolutely critical. And then even if stories themselves are not sales vehicles, brands with better stories do sell more. And when you do it right, it pays off big time. So when people enjoy and identify with a brand story, and we are all brands here at this particular webinar, nonprofits are also brands. People, and also the other thing I want to say is consumers are donors. Like consumers who buy things, they're also donors who give money. So we can't think consumers are one bucket of people and donors are one bucket of people. So I like to study a lot about consumer behavior because I think it absolutely affects and influences and is congruent with donor behavior. 55% more likely to consider a future purchase, more likely to tell the story to others, more likely to make a purchase then and there. Translates to revenue. And I wouldn't be able to do a storytelling webinar without this quote from the series finale of Game of Thrones, which we can debate all day. I didn't like it personally, but I'm a huge Game of Thrones fan. What unites people? Armies, gold flags, no, stories. There's nothing in the world more powerful than a good story. Nothing can stop it. So think about Tyrion Lannister when you're thinking about your stories. The better the story, the stronger that emotional connection becomes. And great stories create strong connections between people. And usually they're used to teach lessons. So stop thinking of storytelling as a megaphone just to promote your agenda and start thinking of it as a gift for your supporters. It's the fuel in the communication engine of the modern nonprofit, and mission-driven storytelling has the power and potential to change hearts and minds, especially around complex and difficult issues. We need to start thinking of ourselves as storytellers if we want to convert stakeholders from passive to passionate. Now, I want you to write in the chat really quickly so that I know you're paying attention. Name a storytelling campaign that really resonated with you. It could be one from a while ago. It could be one that you recently saw. I know there are quite a few during the holidays, especially the Hallmark Channel. The ASPCA, says Barb. Humans of New York. Oh, I use them as an example, I believe, in this presentation. I love Humans of New York. Funds.org, Tim Hortons, the Subaru commercials showing the kids growing up and being drivers themselves. Anything with a kid growing up, oh my, that just like my heartstrings. It gets better. Such great stories. Nike's moms, St. Jude, Serena Williams. She's on my wall. You can't see her. She's pregnant on the cover of Vanity Fair. I am just the biggest Serena Williams fan. I think she's amazing. Nike with disabled autism runner. Google's one about helping the older man with memory. That sounds amazing. Oh, Dove. Dove always comes up when I do these presentations. Dove's Beauty. That's one of the best ads. Okay. I see so many of these. Publix, Pepsi commercial, Microsoft Teams commercial. So you can see it really runs the gamut. Like you're not only citing nonprofits. Oh, Throwing Like a Girl. Love. Dawn doing environmental cleanup with the baby animals. I remember that. I completely remember how they were washing like the little ducks covered with oil. Sarah, I remember that. Awesome. Okay. Thank you so much. I mean, we have a million of these. So you can see that Dove ad, or not Dove ad, that Dawn ad they were washing the baby animals. That was from the Exxon Valdez oil spill, I think, which I don't even know what year that was, but I have that imprinted in my brain, in my memory. So you can see the power that stories have, they don't have to be that produced and polished. They do have to be thoughtful and meaningful. So this ad, and we won't play it, but I will give you the link. This is a very emotional spot that was done for World Down Syndrome Day on March 21st. And this is Core Down, Italy's national organization for people with Down syndrome. They received a letter from a mother who learned that her son will be born with Down syndrome. And she asked them, she said, "I'm scared. What kind of life will my child have?" And so they created this emotional video where 15 people of different ages with Down syndrome respond to her. And the tagline is, "Everyone has the right to be happy." It's truly amazing. So these stories are answering a question from a client technically, but they're also being responsive and connecting emotionally to donors and supporters. And it's just, these videos are truly wonderful. So I really recommend watching them. So the 3-part digital storytelling framework, you can use this on social media. You can use this in your emails. You can use it on your website. You have to collect, craft, and share stories. You can't just collect them and keep them sort of in a box. You can't just write them by yourself and make them up. And you can't share them if you don't collect or craft them. So now that we know the need to invest in storytelling, how do we do it? Step 1, know your audience. Know your audience. Who you're trying to reach. What do they value? Why are they, or would they be interested in your work, and what's in it for them? What are their motivations? We have to truly understand where our audience is coming from. And we also have to really be aware that not everyone is our audience, right? Not everyone's going to resonate with what we do. And before we talk about storytelling collection, especially sharing stories on social media, we have to talk about ethical storytelling concerns. So we know that there's so much emphasis placed on the power, the value of story. Some people have reported this kind of implicit pressure to share their stories to help the organizations raise funds or to advocate more powerfully. And while this might be unintentional, it's an ethical quandary. So how can we sort of get over this hurdle and ensure that we are advocating against exploitation, against having the clients and the people we serve being exoticized, tokenized, and otherized? So here are some concerns that you might want to take into account before you're starting to collect your stories to share. Re-traumatization is a huge, huge concern. Confidentiality and safety, implicit pressure, fear of, the reality not matching the narrative. Maybe things are not all tied up in a bow and it's not necessarily a happy ending. And people think that you want this perfect happy ending. And then lack of control over their story. So really take into account these storytelling concerns, and then make sure you're collecting and crafting your stories ethically based on those concerns. So look beyond the obvious story, expand beyond stories of those engaged with your services directly, challenge audience assumptions, create guiding documents, create a storyteller's bill of rights, create a code of storytelling ethics, create a checklist for your staff. And my favorite is emphasize growth over hardship. So we have the power to determine what we focus on, and we have the power to tell stories in this way ethically. So what we want to do, obviously, when we are doing any kind of storytelling, like storytelling is great in and of itself, but we want to inspire an action. So that might be donate or volunteer or sign a petition, call a legislator, sign up now, share this news. We need to focus on what the action is, because the kind of story that we're going to collect and share, collect, craft, and share is completely dependent on the action we want people to take, right? So we're going to go through the 6 story ideas to explore and collect on social media. All right, first one, creation stories. These are not in any order of importance, by the way. Creation stories are vital, however, for me to understand what was the need, why was this organization founded, what's the need now, and how have things changed? How have things stayed the same? This is something that I think a lot of organizations could absolutely, the story you could tell, especially during COVID, during the pandemic, during now, a lot of the states at least are opening up. So how have things changed? How have things stayed the same? And what is the problem? And how has the problem changed? Because if you are a 60-year-old organization, a lot has changed since you were founded. Doesn't mean this problem doesn't exist, but what has changed and what's become different? Pencils for a Promise really does have a fantastic founder story on its website because it grabs your attention. It's not like Adam started this to build schools. No, it grabs your attention. It began with a question. A small boy begging in the streets of India, what do you want most in the world? A pencil. And they tell the story of how the organization came to be, but it grabs your attention. It piques your curiosity. It makes you interested. The second kind of story, values and ethics stories. What do you stand for and who do you stand for? So we know that donors give to charities based on shared values. So you need to think about in what ways can you convey your unique values and beliefs to supporters. Denver Rescue Mission. They are a religious organization. They believe in the power of Christianity to save people. This is part of their values, part of their ethics. They talk about it constantly, and it's all over their website. It's part of who they are, and it's part of what they believe. So they are able to speak to the correct audience that agrees with those values and ethics. Mira Coalition. They did a My Immigrant Mom tribute. And they focus on highlighting immigrants in the community, immigrants in Massachusetts, immigrant rights, immigrant legislation, things that are going on, things that people need to know. And they're just very focused on their goals, their vision, and the values and ethics that they were based on, that they stand for. So you'll see the values and ethics, that's not for everybody. It's not for everyone in the world, but you'll help your organization attract the right kind of people. And when I say the right kind of people, I mean people that are actually going to take an action. They're actually going to be interested. There are two types of people you want to attract. One, people that are definitely interested in the issue, they're on board. Two, people that are interested, are curious, might want to learn a little bit more. They don't have to be completely on board. You don't necessarily want to attract people that will never, ever be interested, because we can't waste our time and precious resources. We need to focus on the people that will take an action, that will tell their friends, that might be curious to learn more. And we need to focus on those people. All right, another kind of story, the impact story. This is the one that we're all very familiar with. Impact stories are great for fundraising, and they're also great for donor relations. So impact story could also be the need. That's better for fundraising. Like, yes, we've made a lot of progress. We changed a lot of lives, but we still have work to do. That would be great for fundraising. Impact stories that say, here's what your money accomplished. Those are great for donor relations. Those are great for memberships, people that are already with you. So these are stories of lives changed, trajectories altered. These stories focus on the benefits and not the features. So it's not the nuts and bolts of what your organization does. It's the outcome of what your work accomplishes. And then any story actually should focus on how people felt much more than what they went through. But impact stories are so much more impactful if they do focus on the emotions, the feelings, and less on Julia was hungry. She came to our food bank. She got food. She left. That's not a story. That's a recounting of things that happened. And also stories that address knowledge gaps about the population in the program. Those stories are very effective. They almost get more engagement than other stories because they're a little bit surprising. Rosie's Place in Boston, one of my favorite organizations. They're constantly sharing impact stories. They're constantly sharing stories that really define their values and ethics and what they stand for. This is a fantastic story that they shared on Instagram. Click on the link in our bio. They linked out to their blog post. And sometimes a story is really just a quote and a link. So we have to think on social media. We don't necessarily have 1,000 words that we can use. We might have to click out to a video or have people click out to a blog post, or even just put all of the information into one caption. A lot of the time, a great story can be told with a visual, with a photo. I think that's kind of half the battle. And then, of course, if you have confidentiality issues, you can always do creatively staged photography, or I just would stock photos. I'm not sure how I feel about stock photos because some of them look really like overused and kind of cheesy, but make sure you're thoughtful in your stock photos. But a better thing would be to take some creatively staged pictures, or even focus on your staff and the people that provide the services. But what I love about this particular post is that it's asking for participation. It says, please join us in congratulating her and supporting her for the days ahead. So it actually asks for participation. So don't be just a passive observer of this story. Actually participate in the story. I love that. Another type of story, insider stories. These are the people that work for and with your organization. Why do they do it? What have they learned? What's been their best experience? What's been the hardest? This is where you're going to get that behind the scenes insight that really helps humanize the brand and put a face on your nonprofit. So people like to connect with people on social media. Think about how Facebook was first formed. We all wanted to connect with people we knew. And I think this is not necessarily different for a lot of the other social media sites. We need to show that we are human. We need to show the faces of our organization, especially if we're trying to get stories from other people. So in my work, I help clients with digital storytelling campaigns and digital fundraising campaigns. And often they'll say, well, we want to ask people to share their favorite story of their dad, right? Like Macmillan Cancer Support. And what I always say is, well, it's really hard to do that without someone breaking the ice. Like someone has to break the ice. Someone has to do it first. You have to show me an example of what you're looking for. So if this is you, if you are looking to ask other people in your community or on social media for stories, somebody in your organization has to do it first. So this is Macmillan Cancer Support. They did a That's My Dad campaign, fundraising campaign, where people created collages and shared photos and memories of their fathers or their people in their life that had been like a father to them. Another way to approach an insider story is to give your organization this sort of street cred, right? This credibility. If you have someone like Leon Winston, he arrived as a client and he is now the COO and housing director. I think that's a fantastic story. So I would look into your staff and program officers and board members and donors, see who you have in there. You probably have some nuggets of gold. Talk to your interns, talk to the younger people that work for you, talk to your volunteers. I mean, these are people that come to you with passion, and then they have the ability to share that story on social media with their networks, hopefully exposing you and opening you up to a brand new network of people. Okay. Donor stories. Now, donor stories are great. They're not the best for fundraising though, right? They might be good in the middle of a fundraising campaign, but your big fundraising appeal should be focused on your clients and focused on the problem you're solving. But donor stories can be a powerful form of social capital, as long as you're asking them specific and like meaningful questions. Like, why did they give? Why do they continue to give? What does this mean to them? I want all of us, I really want to encourage you, when you are doing that gala or that race, that golf tournament, whatever it is, how we all do that. I don't know if it's spaghetti or I don't know the metaphor. So, that big collage of logos that we all do on our website. Yeah, don't do that on social media. It's so much better if you talk to the person at the Honda dealership and ask these questions. Why did you give? Why do they continue to give? And maybe you just do a little blog post with a picture. Maybe you do a little video. This is the way that you're going to highlight your corporate sponsors, because on social media, you don't just want to post a logo. You're not just going to post a logo and expect it to work. There has to be a story behind it. There has to be a human. There has to be a visual. There has to be a reason for the person on social media to pay attention, but also it's going to attract more viewers, attract more attention and exposure, which is a win-win for you and the donor. Donor spotlight, put them on your website, create a little bit of a template, create a theme. If you don't want to share their photo or they don't want their photo shared, go to Canva, create a graphic. I hope my donation will help other people struggling with finding their way in this world. People can connect to these statements. They can see themselves in this statement and say, oh, that's really neat. I really want to be a donor too. And then we have community stories. Now, these could be really anyone affiliated with your organization or your work. They might not be affiliated with your organization specifically, but they are affiliated with the issue and the cause. So it could be influential and well-respected community members, community partners, legislators, politicians, media personalities. I think of when I worked at the Rape Crisis Center in Boston, and we actually had a city councilor come to one of our events and talk about her sexual assault. It was incredibly powerful. She was not affiliated before with our organization, but she was passionate about the cause and understood what we were trying to do and really advocated and supported us. Tell stories of your board members. This is a question that I get all the time. Should we do long captions, short captions? Should we write it in a blog post? The Night Ministry, they've kind of figured out what they do. They like to write very long email newsletters full of stories, which are read. I mean, they have a huge open rate, huge engagement, and they like to write long captions on social media. That's just what they like to do. You don't have to write this long a caption. This is a story. This is a genuine like news story that a journalist would write. I mean, it's really good. So that's what they do. You do not have to necessarily do that. But the advantage is if you do that, then you can repurpose this in a blog. You can repurpose this in an email. You can tell this story over and over and over again in little tiny snippets, and you'll have content that sort of never goes stale. You can also create a theme volunteer spotlight. Every Wednesday, we share a volunteer spotlight. Here, we've got our little theme, our little template in Canva. And we always share about a community member that's been helping us or a spotlight on someone that has been absolutely imperative and, really helped us succeed. This is the Pine Street Inn on Instagram. They're another Boston-based charity. What I love about this is when you highlight certain community partners, other community partners might take notice. So in Boston, in Massachusetts, we have a huge rivalry between Bob's Furniture and Jordan's Furniture. It's two big furniture stores. Actually, Cardi's, there's a bunch, but it's usually Bob's Furniture and Jordan's Furniture. And Jordan's Furniture somehow got wind of this post and saw that my Bob's Furniture was donating a lot to Pine Street Inn. And they said, well, we're not going to be left out. And so they made a huge donation to the Pine Street Inn. So you just never know where that social proof is going to come from. Now, what you don't want to do is go up to someone and say, tell me your story, because that's very intimidating. They're not going to know where to start. And also, a lot of us don't think we have interesting stories to tell. So you want to ask leading questions. What is your favorite memory? I mean, it depends on who you're talking to. Obviously, you would ask different questions to a client, different questions to a donor, different questions to, a corporate sponsor. But what's your favorite memory, or how has our organization made you feel? How did you feel when you first discovered us? What is one reason that you continue to support us? These are all just sort of leading questions that you can ask. What impact have you witnessed in the community because of our work? So start thinking like a journalist and ask these leading questions. And where are other places that you can find stories? Well, all those bankers boxes that you had in your office, or you still have, with all of those annual reports and grant proposals and event programs and press releases and brochures. Please look through those, and you're going to find seeds of great stories that you can then pursue. You'll find leads. So we have to think like detectives. We have to think like journalists. Everything has the potential to be a story. So how do you craft the stories in a compelling way? We talked a little bit about collecting them. Well, there are 5 essential building blocks of stories that captivate and persuade. So that's hook, character, stakes, details, call to action. You can actually do all of these on social media. You'd be surprised. I'm going to show you some examples. So these are your 5 essential building blocks of stories that captivate and persuade. So what do I mean? What's a hook? If I died, who would come to my funeral? A hook is something that grabs your attention and piques your curiosity and gets you to read more, which is incredibly important, especially in our busy, busy digital age. The time I almost died in Honduras, we have to go now. So you can start your story in the middle maybe rather than starting it from Julia came to us and did this, and this is her story. You could just get creative, or you could just start the story from the beginning. You could just tell me the details. Elaine is a single mother of 2 young boys. When her car broke down, she struggled to come up with the money for repairs. And this is what happened. And here's her picture. You could do what No Kid Hungry does. They often create an entire standalone mini website. So this is created with exposure. It's almost like it's like Squarespace, WordPress, where you can tell these visual stories and you just put great photos and then you put your calls to action in the story in there. And they created this one around the Save Summer for Kids campaign, talking about the effect on children when school is out for the summer and they can't get free lunch and free breakfast. Think about details. These are the descriptive details that are going to put me in the place of the story. Imagine if you were homeless. The air was cold, and the longer I sat there, the more the chill cut to the bone. So you can feel it. You want to really utilize all of the senses when you're doing this kind of storytelling as much as you can, because that's going to help people envision what it's like. It's going to bring them in. Oh, this story. This is Charity Water. This is a woman named Helen. And what I loved about this story is it wasn't just, okay, we brought a well to Charity Water, or to this village. We brought a well to this village. Everyone got clean water and now they're healthy. Helen talked about how it made her feel beautiful for the first time. And I get emotional every time I think about this. They've talked about it on social media, blog posts, emails. They followed up with Helen. I mean, talk about using a story and leveraging it and really getting to know someone. But the point is, water is so much more than health. You know, water made Helen feel beautiful for the first time because she could bathe every day. I mean, that is impactful. So go beyond the obvious story. Okay, these are my 2 kids. This is a photo from Colin. Has orange glasses now. This is like the start of school before COVID, I bet. They look much older, not much older, but a little bit older now. And the reason I share this with you is that we used to love the Berenstain Bear books, the old ones. I don't know if any of you have kids or you've ever read the Berenstain Bears. They all have lessons that they teach, right? If you don't clean your room, mama's going to throw away all your stuff. If you lie about a test, you're going to get in trouble. I mean, there's always stakes and conflict. The new Berenstain Bear books are simply just the Berenstain Bears went to the Renaissance Fair. The Berenstain Bears went to the aquarium. Like, that's what the new books are. And my kids don't like them because a story without stakes is just an essay. There have to be stakes. There has to be some kind of conflict. Don't rely on that old adage of just simply telling me what happened. Tell me what the stakes are. What do you want people to do? What do they need to believe and feel in order to do it? And how can storytelling make them believe and feel that way? When you're talking about inspiration, that call to action that you have at the end of your story, don't just say donate, say join us, help children like Kate. We can do this. Let's work to stop this. Let's solve this together. Can we count you in? That kind of language is really going to drive people to take an action much more than, sign up for our email newsletter or make a donation. The last piece of this is sharing your stories far and wide. So when you think especially about social media, you want to think about your stories as the gold. This is Andy Goodman from the Goodman Center. And he said, you mine the gold, you capture the story, you bring it back to your office, and you pound the gold into different shapes and sizes, depending on who you're talking to and where you're telling it. It makes a lot of sense. A story on Twitter is going to be very different than a story told at your 50th anniversary gala or told on TikTok. They're all very, very different. So you want to make sure you're using your website. You're leveraging all of your digital assets to share your best stories, to kind of put your best foot forward. Share stories on your website. This is Back on My Feet. They share a lot of client stories on the website. Think about your website visitors. Think about what's going to attract them and entice them and get them interested in staying on your website, maybe clicking over to your donate page or clicking over to your email sign up. Stories, that's what they want to see. That's what they want to hear. I know a couple of people mentioned St. Jude's. They send a weekly featured patient story. So I know what to expect. I don't read it every week, but it's very simple. It gives me a little inspiration and happy news in my inbox every week. And I can click on over to their blog, or I can just read the post in my inbox and it's completely fine. But sharing stories in your newsletter. My name is Sharon. I'm one of the counselors at Women Against Violence Against Women, and telling the story of what it means to be a counselor and how I felt when I first walked in. So these stories can also be shared in your email newsletter as well. And then, of course, social media. Now, when you share these stories, they do need to be a little bit shorter, more concise, very poignant. They need to have an eye-catching visual and a specific call to action, especially if you're using them for fundraising. If you're not using them for fundraising, if you don't want people to take a call to action, you can just share a story. You don't have to have a call to action on every post. But if you're trying to raise money, then yes, maybe you want to. This is a great example. There's an eye-catching visual. There's a hook. That's the story. There are stakes involved. There's description here that helps me envision what it's like. And then there's a call to action to support families like Deborah's. Visit the link in our profile. Of course, we can use the actual story feature on Instagram to share kind of snippets, a little bit of B-roll, a little bit of behind the scenes. I look at all of these as, and I was actually saying this to Abby earlier, I think of your social media stories as dots in a big connect the dots. And it helps me get a sense of the bigger picture of your organization. So you can think of them as breadcrumbs leading the way down the path. You can think of them as pieces of a puzzle. You can think of them as dots that connect the dots. So some storytelling tips, you want to make sure that you're addressing relevancy, urgency. Think about the kind of questions that you get asked all the time. Can you tell a story to potentially illustrate the answer to that question? Can you tell a story to address persistent myths and stereotypes? That might be a great way to help you find the trajectory. You can also tell a story in parts. If you have a great story, don't feel like you can't tell it in 2 parts, 3 parts, 4 parts, or that you can't just split it up and revisit it in 6 months, in 3 months. I mean, there are so many ways you can do this, and there's really no one size fits all. I just recommend looking at the kinds of stories that inspire you and seeing how they are, seeing how they're told, and then just really, really getting on board with like being able to tell that story in that way. All right, storytelling tools, Canva, WordSwag, Adobe Spark, Animoto, Typedo. There's so many different tools that you can use to really, really help augment the stories that you're telling. And they're just all free, or they have 50% off, 50% off discounts. I know Canva does for the premium version. WordSwag is one of my favorite mobile apps. Adobe Spark is free, or, also has a nonprofit discount. Animoto is really great for those of us that don't have any video editing skills like myself. You can just put a bunch of photos that you already have, create a collage, a moving collage, and put some music behind it. They have a lot of free music. They have text overlay, a lot of great graphics, and you can use it either on desktop or on a mobile app. Also, Typedo is a great option. Canva has video options as well. So you do not need to hire a production company. You don't need to be a video editor. You don't, we all have our phones. This is our digital media studio right here, right? We have our phones. I have this little thing called a Lumen Cube. It's actually not, I don't have it on right now, but I usually have it on. And I have my microphone. I mean, you've got a lot of stuff that you could create your own videos, DIY your own videos, even on Zoom, you can do it. Okay, excuse me, I have to take a sip of water. I love what Best Buddies does. They often share these mission moments and they look at storytelling in the way that I told you to look at it, where it just connects the dots. One story is not going to rule them all. One story is not going to tell every single story of every department and every single piece of your mission. That's why social media is so great, because you can continually post and get people on board, build that relationship, and build that community. So my favorite quote, Maya Angelou, people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. This is the purpose of telling stories on social media. All right, questions. Now, of course, I'm coughing. Sorry. Oh my gosh. I thought my allergies were done. I thought it was done. It was never done. All right. Well, I can see we have some questions.
We do. We have some really great ones.
Oh, good.
So one that I am kind of interested to hear your take on comes from Rosalie. And they asked, do you have any suggestions to help folks clarify and kind of distill the best stories when the message that the message or the mission is really complex? How do you kind of boil it down to the essentials?
You need to read the book, Find Your Why by Simon Sinek, Sinek. He also did a TEDx talk. So when I first help my clients, we spend probably the majority of our time on just finding the why. And the why is the problem that you're solving. So everything goes back to creating, like, do you want to be a cause or do you want to be an attraction? Like, do you want to be a cause or do you want to be an organization? What is the reason that you exist? And tell me a story of your vision of the future. What does the future look like if you accomplished your vision? Think about the Green New Deal video that oh my God, what is her name? Anyway, think about there's a Green New Deal video, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Oh my God. So she created this great video because the Green New Deal was not in place and no one understood what it was. And she was trying to explain it to people. So she created a video of the future. Like, what would the future look like if the Green New Deal passed? And what would the future look like if it didn't? That video is so great because it's animated and it's hypothetical, but it explains a very complicated issue in a story. So I will try to find that. I would just look it up. I would just Google it. It's on YouTube. But there's ways to tell your story if you don't have, cats and dogs and kids, and if there's not a clear trajectory. And those are usually clients I work with, to be honest. They're usually academic research institutions and places that, it's a long-term thinking. It's not like, okay, we're going to solve this problem this year. It's poverty, it's homelessness, it's these huge issues. But if you can talk about the problem and the reason that you exist and the vision that you have for the future and really try to inspire people and bring them along, I think that's another book to read. Sorry, I'm giving you a lot of books to read. Where is it? Oh, it's called Find Your Red Thread. So Tamsin Webster wrote this book all about that. How do you distill your idea into one thread that kind of goes through everything? It's definitely challenging, but once you find it and once you get it, making sure all of your communications have a piece of that red thread. So, I mean, I would really look at those two resources and spend a lot of time on finding your why, finding your red thread. And that's going to help you. That's also going to help you have almost a reflector for a lot of your messages. Say, well, does it really, is it on board with this? Does it really resonate with this? So it's almost going to be like a litmus test for a lot of your messages, but it's
Okay.
hard work, but it's worth it.
Yeah. That kind of, so you alluded to the point that you can tell really wonderful stories when you don't have the dogs or the cats or the cute babies or and that actually kind of led me to another question that someone asked. Where did she go? Someone asked, we help, child survivors of abuse. There are very strict confidentiality rules in there. So at that point, you're not only having to navigate the ethical storytelling issue, but you're also having to navigate some privacy issues.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that this is something that comes up for people who work in like the
Domestic violence,
medical world, domestic violence,
Yep.
human trafficking. How can you effectively tell stories when it's hard for you to tell a lot of the story types that you covered today?
I mean, Amira Incorporated, AMIRAH, they don't like to use the word rescue. So I'm trying to think of another word. I would say, rehabilitate people that have been sex trafficked.
Okay.
I believe that's the terminology they would use, but they constantly tell stories from that perspective, but they don't use imagery of the person. They never put people on video. And then anytime they do a video, it's always the executive director or the development director saying, we had a woman come into our program. She's 30 days sober. We're so excited. We're going to celebrate her. Or she's on her way, out of our shelter and she's going to go get a job and everything, so they tell the story. So I think that's another way that you could do it. And then, you can also tell stories that don't involve your clients. I mean, if you're dealing with child abuse survivors, I would tell stories of, how are you working with the schools? How are you working with the police? How are you working with social workers? How are you working with the courts? What has your organization meant to all of these other people that are in the same cause space? I mean, I worked in domestic violence for years and rape crisis, and we would never tell stories of people in crisis. I would never put a camera on someone in crisis. So that's like completely out the window.
Yeah.
Also, of course, HIPAA, you can't, if it's a medical organization, you can't necessarily do that. So you do want to make sure that, there are ways to do it without saying, this is Julia and she's a client in our shelter. You can hide the name, you can have the executive director tell the story, you cannot use identifying details. There are ways to do it.
Perfect. That's really helpful. I know that one is a sticking point for a lot of people who have wonderful stories to share, but struggle with the format. That's really helpful. Speaking of formats, Rebecca asked if there is a specific story type of the 6 that you covered that is best suited for different social channels. So should you be sharing an impact story on Facebook and a different story on Twitter, or can you kind of adapt all of them across the board?
I would do a combination. The story you tell depends on the action you're seeking. So obviously, if you're recruiting volunteers, you're going to want to tell a story about a volunteer. If you're looking for donations, you're going to want to tell a story of how there's still more work to be done. This is a movement, this is a problem that we need to solve. But I think you could really tell them across all of the different channels. So I'm thinking, I guess it really does depend where you are. The way you mold the story is in what works on each channel. So TikTok obviously is very different than like LinkedIn, and LinkedIn is very different than Instagram. So it's more about knowing what types of content work, like video works best here, or photos work best here. Photos of faces work best everywhere. That's just across the board. Photos of faces work best. Action photos work well. Colorful photos work well. So I don't think the type of story is as important on the platform, but how you mold it to the specific platform is important.
That's very handy. And I know, tell me if this is still true. It's just a question for me. I know a long time ago, I always used to hear that different people use different channels. And if you want to reach a mom, you would post on Facebook. And if you want to reach a teenager, you post on TikTok. Is that still the case? Are people still kind of siloed? Like, are there demographics on a certain channel and not on others? Or,
Oh yeah. I think even more so now.
okay.
Basically, the only channel you're going to get everybody is YouTube. YouTube has like 90% of the share of people. Facebook is still wildly popular amongst adults, but not necessarily younger adults. So this is why when, if you want to go multi-channel, if you want to reach we have 5 distinct generations of people that we have to reach, or we are trying to reach right now. And it just depends on your goals. So people come to me and say, I want to be on TikTok. And I say, okay, do you want to talk to teenagers? Because that's who's on TikTok. I mean, it's getting more and more mainstream,
Yeah.
but still that's the majority of people that are on TikTok and Snapchat. If you want to reach moms of young kids, then Pinterest is probably the best way to go. Instagram might also be. So it really does depend on who you're trying to reach and attract and what the goal is, you're trying to achieve.
Okay. Is there kind of a ratio that you would recommend? Someone asked if there's a ratio of different kinds of posts that they should be shooting for. Event information, programming, storytelling, announcements, fundraising. How is there a ratio they should aim for?
Yes. So I use the 80-20 rule. 80% should be 100% focus on your audience. So that could be telling them a story that will inspire them, giving them a helpful educational piece of information, a how-to post, or a link to a blog post that's helpful, a research paper, a video that they're going to like. So I see storytelling as part of the 80%, also part of the 20%, depending on if you're using it to get people to take an action, or if you're just getting them to smile or, feel more of an affinity for your organization. So 80% should be very value driven about your audience. And then 20% can be your promotions. I mean, we really have to think about it like we are putting deposits in a bank. I mean, you can't do 80% withdrawals and 20% putting money in, right? You have to actually put more money in before you can take money out. So it's all a value exchange. Like if you're going to ask people for their attention and their action, you have to be providing them with something worthy of their attention and action. You have to be building that trust before you can ask them to participate.
Okay. That makes perfect sense. And that one reminded me of, where did it go? Oh, here it is. So Hannah asked a question, and I think you kind of alluded to it a minute ago, but they asked, how do you tell good stories that make people see your mission as essential? And she pointed out that this is a problem that they tend to run into when they're looking for good stories to tell. They work for an arts organization. She really wants to establish that that their mission is important and essential, but is there a way to do that through storytelling?
I just want you to know that your mission is not going to be essential to everyone. Okay. But the arts, that is essential to a lot of people, but it's a certain subset of people. And I am reminded of 2 organizations that I continued to support in the pandemic, even though their doors were closed. One is a little local museum here, the Wenham Museum. And the second is the community theater that we have ties to because my daughter is very into musicals, like I talked about, very into theater, and participated at the theater pretty frequently. So you can, I was reminded of my daughter's experience. I was reminded of what theater meant to me, what the arts mean to me, how important it is. So the stories you tell, you want to evoke those kinds of emotions in your donors. And that's not going to resonate with everybody. that wouldn't resonate necessarily with my neighbor because maybe they don't care about the arts. I don't know, but it resonates with me. So think about what are the emotions, what motivates people to participate with you, what brings them joy and happiness and inspiration. What would happen if you close your doors tomorrow? Tell the story of what would be lost. What would we lose in the community? What are the stakes involved? Like those are the stories that you can tell. The vision that you have for the future when your doors are eventually open, stories of what the arts mean to children or what the arts mean to seniors in the community or people in the community. I think there's a lot of things you can do. But, I think that convincing people that you are convincing people you're essential right now is probably easier than it was a year ago. But also giving was up across the board. We saw that giving was up across the board in 2020, not just to health organizations, not just to frontline health workers. So finding a way to reach your specific audience, your specific donors, and just convey, say, we're still here. This is still important. And this is why, and here are the stories of our impact, and constantly communicating that is just so vital.
That's perfect. And I realized as you were talking about that, two of the three organizations for whom I'm a monthly donor are nature organizations, not essential in the most literal sense. And
but
they're not
you
even
are essential to you.
Yeah. And they're not even in my state, but they're essential to me.
Yeah.
And I think that note about the fact that you won't be essential to everyone, it's more the matter, like the job of making yourself essential to everyone is impossible and intimidating and sounds terrible. But the job of finding people to whom you are essential is a lot more manageable and less terrifying.
Yeah.
And I think that's wonderful advice. I love that.
Well, I love that. And I love that you gave that example. I think it probably made a lot of people feel better.
Yeah, the two organizations I started giving to on a recurring basis during the pandemic are nature organizations that I don't get to go to because they're in another state. Okay, everyone, you have been so engaged and so interactive with us. I have had a blast talking to a lot of you. For those of you who do still have pending questions about whether or not we're able to send you a recording, the answer is yes. I am going to, as soon as this is over, start the process of downloading this recording, getting it on YouTube, and getting it out to you. So do keep an eye on your inbox. I will send you an email probably tomorrow morning with a link to this recording. Lauren, I think, Lori asked about the workbook. I can include a link to Julia's workbook in there, so you can click on that and download it. And make sure you guys get some other good goodies in there as well. You all have been wonderful. Thank you for spending your Thursday afternoon with us. I know how hard you work, and I know that it's a sacrifice to be in some of these sessions, and we appreciate you and the work you're doing. And I hope you got some great storytelling ideas out of this.
Thank you, everyone.
Have a good one. Julia, I'll see you soon.
I'll see you soon.
Bye, everyone. Bye.